Okay, thanks, Ray. So first we'll give a bit more of an introduction to myself and to game theory. So game theory is a marketing foresight consultancy. So we bring together data analytics, technology to help marketers better understand marketing effectiveness and to make more informed decisions. So the focus for us is always on foresight and predictive analytics. We believe in using historical data to better understand the future and to inform action. So we actually sit within the WPP network. So we have that heritage in marketing and media, which underpins everything that we do for clients within analytics. And that means that a lot of the work that we do does center around measuring marketing ROI and optimizing future activity and spend. Which brings us neatly on to today's topic of how to measure campaign ROI. So marketing measurement and optimization, I think, is an increasingly hot topic. And I think part of that is down to us as the consumer and the way in which we're now consuming media and interacting with brands. So our behavior, I think, is changing in line with different technology changes. And I'd say that mobile has to be one of the biggest technology drivers. So access to the internet on the go through smartphones, through tablets, means that we're consuming content on the go and we're giving brands greater opportunity to reach us. And often we're using devices at the same time to, say, watching TV or consuming multiple media at the same time. If you look at latest Ofcom stats, there's actually now 54% of the UK population have a tablet. And that's growth from next to nothing within just 5 years, which I think is an astonishing growth rate. And the other big impact that I think is worth a mention is the increasing use of social. So it's giving consumer voice and recommendations a much bigger role in purchase decisions, and also enabling brands to build much more engaged relationships and an ongoing dialogue with their customers. And what all this means is that there are many more influences and many more brand touch points in our customer journey to purchase, and often across multiple devices, as well as offline. And marketing budgets are changing to reflect this. So these stats are actually for the US. They show year-on-year change in media consumption in the lighter green bars versus media spend in the darker green. And you can see in the middle bars, so TV remains front and center. So it takes most of the time spent and most of the media spend. But there are some interesting things happening elsewhere. So print spend on the far left, for example, is still a key channel at 18% of spend, but reducing just as share of consumer attention is reducing. But then on the other side, you've got internet and mobile, which are gaining more and more ad dollars, catching up with consumer time spent. Now this, I recognise this is quite a simplistic illustration of what's happening. But in reality, as things are changing, as there are more and more channels, more ways to reach consumers, and the path to purchase is becoming more complicated, businesses are finding that decisions on how to effectively apportion their marketing budgets is becoming much more difficult. And so what we're seeing is the effect that this has on the importance of measurement and analytics for businesses. So, the channel fragmentation and the use of different devices has made understanding the customer and understanding the effectiveness of each part of the marketing more important. And also the other factor in this is also the availability of data. So the availability of data from digital channels makes metrics much more accessible and also more real-time and more tactical in its use. So these are just a couple of the kind of typical questions that we see from clients. They tend to center around understanding the impact of each part of the marketing mix and how to optimize that, how different channels might work together, what the role of new channels is and how effective they are in the mix. And I'd say the mix of TV, VOD and YouTube is a common question in particular at the moment. And also the long-term effects of advertising. But I guess while measurement has become more important, it's also become a lot more challenging. I think one of the biggest challenges is data. So businesses are drowning in data, and digital in particular gives us huge volumes of data, and we've got too many metrics across multiple channels that are competing for our attention almost. I mean, if you think for Facebook dashboard alone, gives us hundreds of metrics. We also we tend to look at and hold these data sets in silo, which causes problems in itself for measurement. So rather than thinking of the customer journey as a joined up experience, we look at each channel and we measure each channel in silo, and this can give us false reads. So we're not really accounting for the effects of other channels or for any channel synergies. And in turn, this often, it can often end up with a decision maker having a lot of different and a lot of conflicting views as to the same question. I think, as well as obviously not getting clear direction from that, it can also impact how valid the different analytics or different methodologies are perceived by the business, which is something that we need to overcome, I think, as an industry. I think another challenge brought about by the focus of digital and real-time data, again, is also that it can take our focus away from the longer-term effects of marketing. So we're almost becoming obsessed with looking at up-to-the-minute metrics and knowing what's happening right now. And that can often be to the detriment of stepping back and looking at the bigger picture. So with all these new channels, data set challenges, I guess how do we tackle this? How do we approach thinking about measuring marketing effectiveness and campaign ROI? Where's the best place to start? And I'd say before planning a campaign or a marketing activity, always ask yourself these questions. And I think asking these questions at the beginning is important, because to measure effectively, you need to make sure that the activity is set up for success, and also that you're collecting the right data, for example. So, I mean, the first step is to just be very clear on what the campaign objectives are, and that could be sales or it could be awareness, but what are you actually looking to measure against? Because if your objective is sales, then will counting Facebook likes suffice? Probably not. If this is part of a test and learn campaign, then what are the questions that you're looking to answer as part of that you're going to learn from and then action later? Next, I would say determining what data is available and appropriate as well. What setup is involved? So a lot of methodologies, so like attribution modeling, for example, they're quite data heavy. Digital attribution as well, for example, will require correct tagging to be set up in advance. So to know what approach will fit, knowing what data is available and what setup you need to be doing right now is absolutely key. Thirdly, what decisions will the measurement inform? So measurement needs to have an outcome and an action really to be worthwhile. There's little point in measuring an activity if the results are not going to inform any decisions. So, what is that particular decision that it's going to be informing? And also, when is that going to be taken? So when are you going to need the results? Are you going to need to make more real-time tactical decisions, or are you going to be looking more at strategic decisions? And that will have a big impact on which approach you choose. And the next step is, obviously based on all this information, so defining what that approach and methodology is, which we'll pick up on again in a moment. But once all this is in place, I think you also need to remember to set targets and benchmarks. What do you expect to happen? And what does success look like? So this might involve looking at historical performance or competitive performance, for example. But what this last step does is it provides the context to the results for the business and also for the decision makers that are going to be using the results to inform their planning. So to picking up on the fourth point, defining the approach and the methodology. There are quite a few different methodologies that will answer different objectives and different questions, and I think that really is the key. And I think the other point is that with any measurement technique, it's not necessarily a case of picking a single method, but also looking at which ones will give you the answer to your questions and will fit the data available, and for those techniques, if there are more than one technique, to work together. because we're talking about ROI today, I'm going to pick on two methodologies in particular, and that's market mix modeling, or MMM, and digital attribution. And I pick those because I think that they're a really good example when it comes to measuring marketing ROI and also getting insight that's really easy to action. So MMM provides an integrated view of how all the channels are performing, whether that's online, offline, and also all the other drivers of a given KPI, whether you're measuring against sales or whether it's awareness or a different KPI. And I'll go into how it works a bit more in a moment. But some of the other key mechanics to be aware of, if you're weighing up different approaches, that, for example, it uses aggregate data across offline and online channels as opposed to customer level data, and it often requires up to 3 years worth of historical data, so it's quite data intensive. Also, the fact that because many of the offline data sources are not available in real time, like digital data sets, which makes sense, and that it tends to be used to inform more strategic questions like overall budget allocation and laydown. It also means analysis tends to be carried out more bi-monthly or quarterly. Digital attribution, on the other hand, so this is something, as I said, we often use alongside MMM depending on business objectives, so it's not necessarily an either-or situation. They work well together as kind of complementary analysis. Attribution can be as simple as last click, through to more advanced fractional attribution models where you're taking into account each point in the online journey. But crucially, whereas MMM is offline and online, digital attribution is, as the name suggests, online only. But what's great about working with digital data and digital attribution is that you can use much more granular data, so you can look at customer level data and path to conversion. And you can use it to generate much more frequent, much more tactical insight on how to use your digital channels. And it can be a great complement, as I said, to MMM, to give a more real-time view of how your digital channels are performing, which will help you, really manage those channels much better. But used on its own, obviously, it won't give the same kind of robust ROIs, which take into account the effects of offline channels and other non-marketing drivers. So I think they really are complementary to each other. So I'm going to concentrate more on MMM for the second half of the presentation because we're really looking at ROI as a topic here. So I'm going to talk through how to use it to measure campaign ROI, and also one of our client case studies to give you a more tangible example. So this is a typical output from a model, and it shows week by week contribution of different levers to the business KPI, which is often sales. In this case, it's a financial services provider. It's one of our clients, and they are looking at the number of loan applications that are being driven by week. And you can see the number of loan applications is represented by the black trend line in the chart. So the MMM model uses statistical regression techniques to understand what drives sales, or what drives loan applications in this case, including disentangling the role of all the different marketing channels and campaign activities. To do this, we take data by week across all the different internal and external factors that drive applications. So whether that's marketing, promotions, PR, competitor activity, economic factors. And I'll show you a couple of examples quickly on the next slide to give you a better idea. As I said, we collect this data typically going back 3 years, so it's quite data intensive. But from there, we have enough data and, crucially, enough variation in the data to disentangle and quantify which factors are driving sales and to what extent. So it's almost like solving an incredibly complex simultaneous equation with sales on one side and drivers on the other. And so from here, you can understand how many incremental sales or loan applications were generated as a result of a given channel. And from there, it's just a simple calculation using cost data to obviously get to the efficiency of each of the channels. So in this example, so you can see that some of the biggest contributions to application demand is the proposition itself, which is in green. So that's basically the loan rates, and also aggregator positioning, which is the bright pink. But you can also see the relative impact of other typical marketing channels like paid search, which is in yellow throughout, TV, which is a bit further up above the pink and the darker green. And you can see, so they were advertising more on TV in the earlier periods over this time series. And then above that, you've got direct mail in dark purple and press in blue. So you can see all the different contributions. And as I alluded to earlier, it's quite a data-intensive piece. We tend to collect 3 different types of data sets, all of which are trended over time. And that's just so that we can account for as many factors as possible. So the first data set would be the dependent variable. So that's the KPI that you're looking to influence or optimize, which often, as I said, can be sales, but you also work a lot with awareness, consideration, new customer acquisitions, or in the example that we just saw, loan applications. Secondly, we would collect all the data on internal variables. So that's all the factors which are within your control and all the factors that you're potentially looking to adjust. So that could be pricing, it could be promotions, marketing spend by channel, PR activity, and then finally the external variables. So these are really the control factors that might impact the business, like seasonality, for example. So controlling for the fact that sales for ice creams and for barbecue equipment will typically rise when the temperature rises, for example. And controlling for national holidays like Christmas. Everything needs to be taken into account to really get a true read on how each of the different levers are impacting sales. So we talked a lot about measuring ROI and the different types of data required. But I think the most important thing in measuring marketing effectiveness is really the optimization piece and how you're actually going to use the information that you've got. And with this analysis, so this is an example of one of the outputs. You can build media response curves like the ones shown in the chart. So you've got annual spend across the bottom, and then on the y-axis you've got sales. And the kind of questions you can answer with these curves is things like, well, how should I divide my budget between media channels? How can I reduce my media investment without impacting sales? How should I spend the next pound of my marketing budget? And in this example, you can see, so a couple of the channels like press and radio in blue and purple. So investment is already into diminishing returns. So the cross on each of the curves marks how much the business is currently investing. And you can see that the crosses for those two already getting into the flattened tail of the curve, where you can get less return for every additional pound spent. If you look at search and TV, on the other hand, so the yellow and the pink, investment could potentially still be increased. And so this chart is actually a real client example, and by optimizing their budget, we actually increased their sales by 26% year on year. This was the first MLM project that they did with us, which obviously had a huge impact on their business. So to finish off, I'm just going to run through a very short case study. And this is to show that there's different ways of using MMM and of integrating research metrics and longer-term metric within MMM. So I'm going to run through some of the work that we did for a big FMCG brand looking at cleaning and disinfectant brand. So the client wanted to understand the role of different online and offline media on the path to purchase, including short and long-term effects of media, and also how to optimize all of their activity across the customer journey. So what we did is we built a series of nested models using different tracking data on awareness, involvement, consideration as dependent variables, as well as purchase data. And then within each of these models, we also included data for paid advertising, for online, so owned and earned data, and then all the external variables that I mentioned previously as control factors. And each of these models was then in turn a factor in subsequent stages in the customer journey. So awareness was a factor for involvement, for example. And this helped us build a really concrete view of the customer journey and how different levers were acting at different points in the journey. So by using this approach, we got some really interesting results, which show how different channels perform through the journey, and then how to optimize against each of the different KPIs, depending on what you're actually trying to affect. One of the interesting things that I pulled out here is we actually looked at measuring the impact of Facebook, which you can see in the blue in the chart. So as an established range of cleaning products, I mean, the brand is already a household name, so we knew that Facebook would probably have quite a limited short-term impact or direct impact on sales, but we were able to measure an impact on awareness and consideration. And through this impact, so because we knew it impacted awareness and consideration, and we knew their subsequent role in sales, we were also able to provide the client with an overall sales impact for Facebook for the first time ever, which was 0.7% of total sales at an ROI of 4, which is hugely valuable to the business. It was the first time they were able to measure the sales impact or revenue impact of social media. And also, I mean, we went a stage further than that, because we broke down Facebook activity by paid, owned, earned media, as you can see by the different shades of blue. So we could also understand that earned media drove awareness more than paid, and that's due to viral shares of content and the extended reach of fan networks. And then also, by contrast, paid tended to drive more consideration than earned. So using this kind of new understanding of how media works across the different stages of the customer journey, the client was able to optimize future activity against the different objectives and different KPIs. And it also helps give the client actually the confidence to go on and form quite a large strategic partnership with Facebook, which is great news. So hopefully that's given you a flavor for what attribution and marketing mix modeling are about, and how they use to support marketing effectiveness decisions. If there are any questions, we should have a few minutes left, and I've also got my details up on the slide, so feel free to get in touch on email or Twitter if you prefer.